Hello, everyone. My name is Arthur, and I'm what you'd call an old-school kind of guy. I believe in a firm handshake, looking a man in the eye, and above all, I believe in family. For years, I thought family was a fortress, a safe place you build with love and sacrifice. But I learned, the hard way, that sometimes the people you give everything for are the very ones who will leave you standing in the rain with nothing. When my own son, my only child, told me I wasn't good enough to come to my granddaughter's birthday party, in the very house I'd bled myself dry to help him buy, I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I just smiled. A quiet, tired smile. Walked away and started a fire that would burn their perfect, hollow little world right down to the ground. You won't believe what happened next. But before I tell you the rest of this story, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. And please, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It truly means a lot to know who's out there listening to an old man's tale. It all started, I suppose, the day my Eleanor passed. We'd been married for 42 years, and when she left, she took the heart of our home with her. All I had left was our son, Leo. I'd look at him and see her eyes, her smile. I made a promise to her, a silent one, that I'd always look out for him, always make sure he was safe and happy. For a while, that promise was easy to keep. Leo was a good kid, got a decent job after college, and then he met Sophia. Sophia was, polished. She came from a family with money, the kind of money that announces itself in the brand of your purse, in the casual way you talk about summering in Europe. Her father, Richard, was a big-shot property developer, a man who built glass towers and looked down on everyone from the top floor. Her mother, well, she collected charities, the way other women collect shoes. They were a different breed from me. I spent my life with sawdust under my fingernails, a carpenter who built sturdy, honest things with my own two hands. I was proud of the calluses on my palms. They were a testament to a life of hard work. To them, I think, my calluses were just a sign that I was common. But Leo loved her, and for me, that was enough. When they decided to get married, I was happy for them. When they wanted to buy a house, a beautiful, big colonial in a neighborhood I could never afford, I didn't hesitate. They didn't have the down payment, not even close. Sophia said the bank needed to see a significant chunk of cash, and her parents, despite their wealth, were, in her words, teaching them the value of doing it themselves. The irony was so thick you could choke on it. So I did what any father would do. I took the money Eleanor and I had saved for our retirement, the nest egg we were going to use to travel, to see the Grand Canyon, to finally relax, and I handed it over. A check for $75,000. "It's a loan, Dad," Leo had said, his eyes a little watery. "We'll pay you back every penny." I just clapped him on the shoulder and said, "That's what family is for, son." They got the house, and just as I predicted, the talk of paying me back evaporated. It was fine, truly. Seeing them happy, seeing them start their life, that was payment enough. Then my granddaughter Lily was born. She was the spitting image of Eleanor. Holding her for the first time, I felt a piece of my heart stitch itself back together. For her, I would have done anything. And I did. A year later, Leo lost his job. The company downsized. It was tough, and Sophia wasn't the kind of woman who handled tough very well. The stress was immense. So I stepped in again. "Don't you worry about the mortgage. I'll cover it until you're back on your feet." So every month, like clockwork, $3,000 left my modest savings account and went straight to the bank to pay for their big, beautiful house. Leo found a new job eventually, but somehow my covering the mortgage just became the new normal. It was never discussed. The money just kept flowing. Then there were the extras. Sophia needed a new car because her old one was unreliable for the baby. I co-signed the loan. They wanted to renovate the kitchen because Sophia felt it wasn't conducive to entertaining. I drained the last of my savings for that. For 6 years, I was their safety net, their silent benefactor. I stopped buying new tools for my workshop. My truck got older and rustier. I ate simpler meals, put off fixing the leaky roof on my own small house. I did it all for them, for Leo, for Lily. I'd visit every Sunday, bringing groceries, sometimes fixing a loose cabinet door or a leaky faucet. I was useful. I was needed. Or so I thought. The moment it all shattered came on a crisp Saturday in October. Lily's 7th birthday was the following week, and I was in their kitchen, the one with the marble countertops I paid for, talking about the custom dollhouse I was building for her in my workshop. It was my masterpiece, with tiny hand-carved furniture and little electric lights. I couldn't wait to see her face. I was telling Leo about it, my voice full of excitement, when he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. It was a nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. I knew that look. It meant bad news was coming. "Dad," he started, his eyes fixed on a spot on the floor, "about Lily's birthday next Saturday." "I was thinking of bringing the dollhouse then," I beamed. "We can set it up in her room together." He took a deep breath. "Actually, Dad, well, Sophia was thinking that maybe it would be better if you didn't come to the party." The words didn't register at first. They floated in the air, nonsensical. It was like he'd spoken in a foreign language. "What do you mean?" I asked, a small, confused laugh escaping my lips. "It's Lily's birthday." "I know, and you can see her the next day. We can have a special birthday visit, just you and her." He was talking fast now, the words tumbling over each other. "It's just, Sophia's parents are going to be there, Richard and Elizabeth, and a lot of their friends, Richard's business associates." I just stared at him, waiting for the real reason. He finally looked at me, his face full of shame that wasn't strong enough to overcome his weakness. They find you, a little, intense, Dad? You're very hands-on, and your stories, they're all about work sites and wood grain. It's just a different world. Sophia wants everything to be perfect. She wants to make a good impression. It's just easier this way." Easier. The word hit me like a physical blow. 6 years of financial sacrifice, of putting their needs before my own, of loving them with every fiber of my being, and my presence had been reduced to an inconvenience. I wasn't a grandfather. I was a social liability. I looked around their perfect kitchen. I saw the ridiculously expensive espresso machine I'd bought them for their anniversary. I saw the silk curtains in the dining room that Sophia just had to have. My money was good enough. My labor was good enough. But I, the man, the father, the grandfather, was not. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get angry. Something inside me went cold and still and strangely calm. "I see," I said, my voice even. I put down the sandpaper I'd been holding. "Well, you tell Sophia and her parents not to worry. I won't be there to embarrass them."
"Dad, it's not like that," Leo started, but his voice was weak. He knew it was exactly like that. I walked to the door, my work boots silent on the polished hardwood floors I'd helped install. I didn't look back. As my hand touched the doorknob, I paused. "By the way, son," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion, "the mortgage payment is due on the 1st. You might want to make a note of that." And then I walked out, leaving him standing alone in the beautiful, expensive silence of the house that was no longer his, but the bank's. The drive home was a blur. The familiar streets of the town where I'd lived my whole life seemed foreign, hostile. Every corner held a memory of Leo, teaching him to ride a bike on this street, taking him for ice cream at that shop, walking him to his first day of school past that park. Had I raised a man so weak that he would discard his own father to please his wife's snobbish parents? The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. When I got back to my own small, quiet house, the silence was deafening. It was the same silence I'd lived with since Eleanor died, but tonight it felt different. It wasn't peaceful. It was empty. I walked into my workshop, the smell of sawdust and varnish usually a comfort, but now it just smelled like work. On the bench sat Lily's dollhouse, nearly complete. My hands, calloused and worn, hovered over the tiny roof shingles. I'd poured hundreds of hours into this, channeling all my love for her into every tiny detail, and I wasn't even allowed to give it to her at her own party. For a moment, pure, hot rage washed over me. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to call Leo and scream at him, to tell him what a spineless, ungrateful child he was. I wanted to drive back there and confront Sophia and her smug, condescending parents. But then, as quickly as it came, the anger receded, leaving behind a cold, hard clarity. An emotional outburst was what they'd expect. It would only confirm their view of me as a simple, unrefined man who couldn't control himself. No, a strategic response was required. They had drawn a line in the sand, and they had declared war on me with a smile. They thought I was just a simple carpenter. They were about to find out that a man who can build a house knows a thing or two about its foundation, and theirs was about to crumble. Instead of wallowing, I walked to the old oak filing cabinet in the corner of my office. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a thick, worn ledger. For 6 years, I had meticulously recorded every single dollar I had given them. The down payment, every mortgage transfer, the money for the kitchen, the endless loans for property taxes or a new suit for Leo. I hadn't done it for any specific reason. Maybe it was just the craftsman in me, the need to measure and account for things. But now, looking at the columns of numbers, I saw it for what it was, a book of evidence, my case against them. The first key decision was the easiest. The next morning, a Sunday, I called my bank's 24-hour helpline. "I'd like to cancel a recurring automatic transfer," I said to the polite voice on the other end. I gave her the details. She confirmed the amount, $3,000, and the recipient. "And you'd like to stop this effective immediately?" she asked. A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. It felt like cutting an anchor chain. "Yes," I said, and the word felt like the first breath of fresh air after years underwater. Effective immediately. That was the first domino. The second decision required more thought. It was my secret weapon, my trump card. When they were buying that house, the inspection report had come back clean. But I, with my 50 years of construction experience, had seen something the inspector missed. A hairline fracture in one of the main support beams in the basement, a sign of a serious foundational issue. Getting it properly repaired with city permits, engineers, and contractors would have cost them $30,000 and killed the sale. So I fixed it myself. I spent a week in their dark, damp basement, sistering the beam with steel plates, pouring a new concrete footing, and fabricating a custom jackpost system to redistribute the load. It was a solid, professional-level fix, but it was completely off the books. No permits, no inspection, no record. I had taken photos of the entire process on an old digital camera, just for my own records. I knew where that memory card was. I also knew that without my specific annual maintenance, checking the tension, looking for any new stress fractures, that brilliant, unpermitted fix could, over time, fail spectacularly. It was their biggest secret, and they didn't even know they had it. For the next few weeks, I heard nothing. I imagined Leo was scrambling, trying to figure out how to tell Sophia that her father-in-law, the walking ATM, was suddenly closed for business. The silence was telling. They didn't call to ask if I was okay. They didn't apologize. They were waiting, assuming I'd crawl back, that my need to see Lily would override my self-respect. They had miscalculated badly. The first of the month came and went. The mortgage was now officially late. And that's when the phone finally rang. It wasn't Leo. It wasn't Sophia. It was her father, Richard. "Arthur," his voice was smooth, like polished marble, but with an undercurrent of steel. "I hear there's been some misunderstanding regarding your financial commitment to the children." The sheer arrogance of it, to call my sacrifice a commitment, as if I'd signed a business contract.
No misunderstanding, Richard, I said calmly. I've simply decided to retire from my position as their personal bank. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Now let's not be dramatic. I think you're underestimating the situation. Sophia is very distressed, and when my daughter is distressed, I get involved. A man your age, on a fixed income, you wouldn't want to make powerful people your enemies. Reputations can be fragile things. It was a threat wrapped in a velvet glove. He was telling me he could ruin me. He thought I was a bug he could squash. Is that so? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Well, you tell me, Richard. As a developer, what's more fragile, an old man's reputation or the foundation of a house with unpermitted, undocumented structural repairs? The silence on the other end of the line was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. He didn't know what I was talking about, not yet, but I had planted a seed of fear. The master builder had just been told there was a crack in his perfect world. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, he finally hissed, his composure gone. It's no game, I replied. It's just a friendly piece of advice. You should be very, very careful about threatening a man who knows exactly which walls are load-bearing. I hung up the phone. The war had begun, and I had just fired the first real shot. My turning point came 2 weeks later. Through a friend who was a member, I learned that Richard was hosting his annual charity gala for the Developers Fund for Urban Youth. It was the biggest social event of the season for his crowd. All his partners, investors, and high society friends would be there. It was the perfect stage. I wasn't going to crash the party and make a scene. That wasn't my style. My revenge would be quieter, colder, and far more devastating. I spent 3 days preparing. I created 12 identical folders. Inside each one, I placed a neatly organized summary of the financial ledger showing the nearly $250,000 I had given to Leo and Sophia. Behind that, I put copies of key receipts, the $75,000 down payment, the invoice for the $20,000 kitchen renovation. Then came the master stroke. I took the memory card from my old camera and printed out a series of high-quality photographs of the foundation repair I'd done. The before shots showed the dangerous cracked beam. The during shots showed me, covered in sweat and dirt, installing the steel reinforcements. The after shots showed the finished but clearly unpermitted work. I included a cover sheet written on an old typewriter to ensure anonymity. It was a concerned citizen's report on the dangers of uninspected structural work, using the house on 24 Oakhaven Lane as a case study and questioning the ethics of a prominent developer whose own family resided in a potentially unsafe structure.
The night of the gala, I put on my best suit, the one I wore to weddings and funerals. I drove to the country club, but I didn't go in. I waited in the parking lot. My friend had given me a list of the 12 most important people on Richard's guest list: his primary business partner, his biggest investor, the city councilman he'd golfed with, the lifestyle editor of the local magazine. I handed the folders to a valet I knew, a good kid whose dad I'd worked with years ago. I gave him $200. Just make sure these get into the hands of these specific people tonight, after the main course, I told him. And no one needs to know where they came from. He nodded, his eyes wide. He knew a secret mission when he saw one. The next morning, I made one more anonymous call, this time to the city building inspector's office. I told them I was a contractor who had recently been fired from a job at 24 Oakhaven Lane, and that I had serious concerns about unpermitted foundational work that could pose a public safety risk. Then I waited. The fallout was faster and more spectacular than I could have ever imagined. The city inspector, legally obligated to follow up on a safety tip-off, visited their house the next day. Within an hour, a big, ugly red tag was slapped on their front door, deeming the house uninhabitable until a full structural engineering review and all necessary permitted repairs were completed. An engineer's estimate for that kind of work? North of $50,000. Meanwhile, at the gala, my little folders had done their work. Richard's business partner was furious. His biggest investor was spooked. The city councilman was suddenly unavailable for their weekly golf game. The story of Richard's own family living in a potentially dangerous house, all while he was raising money for urban youth, was a PR nightmare. His reputation as a meticulous, trustworthy developer began to crumble. For Leo and Sophia, it was a catastrophe. They were legally barred from living in their own home. The bank, catching wind of the red tag and the missed payment, immediately began foreclosure proceedings. They were homeless, broke, and now socially radioactive. About a week later, my doorbell rang. It was Leo. He stood on my porch, a shadow of the man he used to be. He looked tired, defeated, and utterly broken. "Dad," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Can I come in?" I led him into the living room. He looked around at my simple, comfortable home. He saw the new recliner I'd bought, the photos of me and my sister's family from a recent fishing trip. He saw a life that was calm and happy, a life that no longer revolved around him. "He lost the house," he said, staring at the floor. "We're staying in a hotel. Sophia's parents, they're not helping. Her dad is so angry about the gala, he's barely speaking to us." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. And I meant it. I never wanted to destroy my son, only the false world he was living in. He finally looked at me, his eyes full of tears. "It was you, wasn't it? The folders? The inspector?" I didn't deny it. I just nodded slowly. "You and your wife's family, you pushed me into a corner, son. You left me no choice but to show you what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." He broke down then, sobbing like a child. He told me everything, how Sophia had been pressured by her parents to cut me out, how Richard had always looked down on me, how he, Leo, had been too much of a coward to stand up for his own father. "I chose them over you, Dad. I chose their money and their status over my own family, and now I have nothing." I let him cry. I let him get it all out. When he was finished, I spoke, not with anger, but with a quiet sadness. "You didn't just lose a house, Leo. You lost my trust. You lost my respect. Those things are much harder to rebuild than a foundation." "But can they be rebuilt?" he asked, his voice full of a desperate hope. "Forgiveness is one thing, Leo," I said, looking him straight in the eye. "I forgive you for being weak. But trust? That's different. Trust is earned. It's earned by your actions, not your apologies. You have a long road ahead of you to earn that back." That was the last time we spoke for a long time. He and Sophia moved into a small apartment. He got a second job. She, for the first time in her life, had to learn what a budget was. They were starting over, from scratch, the way they should have in the first place. As for me, my life began anew. With the money I was no longer pouring into their black hole of a mortgage, I fixed my roof. I bought a new, reliable truck. I took my sister and her husband on a trip to the Grand Canyon, fulfilling the dream Eleanor and I had shared. I stood at the edge of that vast, beautiful chasm, and I felt free. I'd learned the hardest lesson of my life, that your love and sacrifice are precious gifts, and you should only give them to people who value them. You cannot build a family on a foundation of disrespect. I spent most of my days now in my workshop, not fixing other people's problems, but creating beautiful things for myself. And I finished Lily's dollhouse. It sits in my living room, a reminder of both love and loss. One day, when her father has earned the right to knock on my door again, maybe she'll get to play with it. Until then, I am at peace. I'm a man who finally learned that the most important thing you can ever build is a life you respect. And that's a foundation that can never be broken. Thank you for listening to my story.